Comrades, I have labelled this public education the last frontier for the right, not because I want to just speak exclusively on a parochial issue as President of the Teachers Federation. I'm here as an individual, but because I believe passionately that what's happening in public education is an exemplar for what's happening right across society. And if as a nation, and indeed as a left, if we don't understand what's happening in public education and the attacks on it, then I'm afraid the right is going to essentially, I'd say within the next 5 to 10 years, dismantle what we know as a public education systems in schools, in TAFE and university. And any capacity for our society to have people, working class people, or anyone access anything beyond what is meted out to them, I think is under attack. I want to then move from just talking about that as an exemplar to what we may learn from some of the struggles that we've been involved in as a union, and link it to the broader notion of what the strategic objectives for the left should be. Look, it's no coincidence that Murdoch, corporate America, the corporate world in Australia through right-wing think tanks have all themselves chosen public education as the ultimate battleground over the next, and they've given themselves a time period essentially to cripple it. And cripple it for very good reasons, not just financial. Murdoch, for instance, and this is, the ABC ought to be ashamed of this. The ABC gave Rupert Murdoch capacity to speak at the Boyer Lectures in 2008, as though Rupert Murdoch needs another opportunity to put his point of view. The public broadcaster says, here you go. So in that Boyer's Lectures, Murdoch pontificated this. The unvarnished truth is that in countries such as Australia, Britain and particularly the US, our public education systems are a disgrace. Despite spending more and more money, our children seem to be learning less and less, especially for those who are most vulnerable in our society. And he went on to observe that it is arguable that our lesser schools are leaving far too many children innumerate, illiterate and ignorant of our history. What Murdoch failed to tell the ABC was that he didn't write the lecture. The Boyer Lecture was not written by Rupert Murdoch, it was written by Bill McGurn, who was George W. Bush's speechwriter. There's a point to all of this. Murdoch is very closely linked to Jeb Bush and Foundations for Excellence in Education. These right-wing think tanks, and there's an absolute proliferation of them across America and in England and in Australia, with massive corporate sponsorship. You can't name a corporation that is not connected intimately to a right-wing think tank attacking public education, whether it's Hewlett-Packard, Shell, BP, IBM, Coca-Cola, KFC, McDonald's, Microsoft. You can list corporate America, and they all are funding these right-wing think tanks. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why corporate America, if there's such an animal, and certainly around the world, is saying the next frontier is attacks on public education. Pasi Sahlberg of Finnish Education calls it that what's really happened is a global education reform movement. He calls it the germ, which is infecting education. If I could bring it down to back to Australia, what's happening in Australia is the same pressures are happening in this country now. We've been involved in a very bitter campaign, particularly in the last 12 months, but for much longer, of the notion of school autonomy. And I want to just give you this language, because what the right was able to do, at least in Margaret Thatcher's time and ever since, and there's more people doing it now. Philip Blond from a right-wing think tank in the UK called Respublica, they have used and captured the language of the left. Localism, autonomy, self-management, local control. But what the agenda is to essentially fragment and break up our education systems, to the extent now that universities are only getting about 40% of their funding from public dollars. Our TAFE system in New South Wales alone, 73% of course delivery is done by casual staff. 73%. In our school system, of course, what's happening right across Australia is this notion that you will give schools a bucket of money, autonomy, and that they will then employ their staff and their resources from that. What it essentially is this: instead of having a guarantee from government that they will fund a free, secular and democratic education system, which is what public education is, unlike Catholic and those other education systems which serve a very different purpose, The public system is about educating and building community. The Catholics and the other education is about breaking up community. And that's essentially the role they play. It's a negative role, and we've got to call it for what it is. But the attacks in New South Wales have led to, in the last just few months, loss of multicultural ESL consultants right across New South Wales. Support for refugee kids, completely demolished. Professional learning, gone. Curriculum director at New South Wales Department of Education, gone. And the list could go on. We have had now essentially the fragmenting of the system. Now, what I want to draw from that lesson is this. The left, for too long, I think, have often been guilty of being beguiled by that language too, because it was our language. And so when you hear government saying it, one of the difficulties has been for our union, has been to say to people, that's not what it means, and that's not what it is in practice. In practice, it is about essentially breaking up and fragmenting the system. And there's a reason for it, because there's something transformational about public education in terms of building community and certainly giving working class children an opportunity to succeed in life. And so in the TAFE system, of course, right across this country, we've had marketisation brought in, and the TAFE system now, I don't believe the TAFE system, which was once the envy of the world, I don't think we will have essentially a TAFE system in this country within the next 4 to 5 years. Abbott and Pine, of course, they have chosen education as one of the battlegrounds. And what they have said is it's not about funding, it is essentially about autonomy, just giving schools the chance. It's a form of privatisation. So I believe I want to draw this together with these points. Politically, we've got to educate about language. The importance of language is critical in all of this. And we've got to be able to, in terms of our ability to counter the right-wing think tanks and that language, we've got to understand their use of language and turn it back onto them. That whole notion of small government and taxation are the political priorities that we need to tackle, because that's essentially the same agenda. Organisationally, we have to engage and educate young people. Our union has been doing that. The Teachers Federation in New South Wales, as an example, is growing. Over 50% of our membership now have joined since 2004, and we've spent the last 10 years building a massive young new educators network base where we literally do trade union training with thousands of teachers each year, young teachers coming in, and it's paying dividends. They're now sitting on our executive, they're now becoming officers of the organisation. And I think that initiative is important. We need to also, I'm very mindful of that, we've got so many unionists who have retired but are still active and intelligent and engaged and and there's a resource that we're not harnessing as a movement. The people who they retire from the workforce, where do they go other than to sit at home reading the compact Sydney Morning Herald and being pissed off to buggery that they can't be involved in the movement? And I think that the unions can play a role engaging their ex-members in campaigns directly, not in a patronising way, but in a direct way, and harnessing that. And I think that The last point I want to make is this. Our union has been fined three times last year, the fines have hit us. They have threatening increasing those fines 11-fold. But they're also talking about, in the last fine that we got in June for the strike action we took to secure staffing, was deregistration. The judge made a point about deregistration, and I'll finish on this point. We are learning, and if we have not learnt as a union movement, that we will not be able to win things as unionists by ourselves. We may have when union density was around 60, 70, 75% 30 years ago. But when it's down in some workplaces to virtually nothing, and in some private enterprises down to 10, 12 or 13%, and the public sector union is high, what it means as a public sector union is that we can be very isolated. So one of the things that we have to do as a movement is to make sure that when the public sector unions and the other unions are engaged in activity, that there is strong community understanding and awareness and knowledge and engagement in the same campaign issues. That's the only way unions are going to be able to win struggles collectively with the community. So thank you for your interest.